"I don't feel safe sitting next to him," she whispered, leaning toward the flight attendant like she was sharing a dark secret. The words weren't loud, but they landed hard, sharp, pointed, and laced with something colder than fear. It was a routine boarding at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. The flight to Chicago was nearly full, people shuffling through the narrow aisle with bags in tow, tired expressions on their faces. Businessmen in suits, families wrangling toddlers, students with headphones on. It was just another flight on just another day. Elijah Brooks boarded quietly, dressed in dark jeans and a plain navy blue hoodie. He walked with the quiet confidence of someone used to observing more than being observed. He placed his duffel in the overhead bin and took his window seat in row 14, nodding politely at the woman already sitting by the aisle. She didn't nod back. In fact, her body shifted noticeably, arms crossed, posture stiff. She glanced at him, then away. Again. And again. Her discomfort didn't come from anything Elijah had said or done. He was simply there, and for her, that seemed to be enough to spark alarm. As the last few passengers boarded, she pressed the call button. A flight attendant arrived quickly, smiling as she leaned in. That's when it happened. The woman leaned closer and whispered, "I don't feel safe next to him." She didn't point, didn't raise her voice, but the message was clear. And it hit like a silent accusation. The flight attendant's expression shifted, just slightly. Enough to register that something had changed. Elijah, who had heard it all, didn't react. He just looked ahead at the seat in front of him, eyes calm but distant. As if he'd been here before. As if this wasn't new. But this time, it wouldn't end the way she expected. The flight attendant crouched slightly, lowering her voice so as not to attract attention. "Sir, I'm sorry to bother you," she began, polite but clearly uneasy. "Would you mind confirming your seat assignment for me?" Elijah blinked, then pulled out his boarding pass. 14A, he said, handing it over without hesitation. She checked it, nodded, then looked over at the woman. "Ma'am, he's in the correct seat." The woman didn't seem satisfied. "I don't care." He was staring at me. "He's acting strange," she insisted, her voice rising just enough to draw a few glances from nearby rows. "You don't know what people like him are capable of." There it was. People like him. The words didn't have to be loud to be venomous. Elijah's jaw tightened slightly, but he said nothing. He'd heard that phrase enough in his lifetime to know what it meant. The flight attendant glanced at him apologetically, then turned to a second crew member. A quiet conversation followed near the galley, accompanied by cautious glances in Elijah's direction. Elijah stayed seated, hands folded on his lap. Composed. But behind his eyes, a storm was building. Passengers in the surrounding rows had begun to pay closer attention. A man across the aisle removed his earbuds. A mother, too, rose up, shifted uncomfortably in her seat, sensing the tension. The woman, emboldened now by the commotion she'd caused, straightened in her seat. "Why is no one doing anything? Are we just going to wait until something happens?" she asked loudly. "I'm not trying to be difficult, but this is about safety." The flight attendant returned. "Ma'am, he hasn't done anything wrong. If you're uncomfortable, we can see if there's another seat available for you." "No," she snapped. "I shouldn't have to move. I didn't do anything wrong. He did something wrong just by making me feel unsafe." Elijah finally turned to look at her. Not angry. Not defensive. Just looking. For a long moment, he held her gaze with calm, unwavering eyes. "I'm just trying to get home," he said quietly. But the woman wasn't listening. She was too wrapped in her own fear, or pride, to hear the steady dignity in his voice. The flight attendant looked at Elijah again, a mix of discomfort and sympathy in her eyes. And still, he said nothing more. He didn't need to. Not yet. Elijah had been here before. Not in this exact seat, not with this exact woman, but in moments like this. Moments where judgment came faster than facts, where assumptions weighed more than truth. He breathed slowly, keeping his body relaxed, his face unreadable. He knew how quickly things could escalate when you looked like him and responded the wrong way. The woman was now standing halfway in the aisle, gesturing with exaggerated frustration. "This is ridiculous. He's making everyone uncomfortable. Just look at him, he hasn't said a word. That's suspicious in itself." Elijah's fingers tapped gently on his leg, not out of nerves, but calculation. He watched the flight crew murmur among themselves again. The nearby passengers leaned in, caught between curiosity and unease. Then, slowly and deliberately, Elijah reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. The moment his hand moved, the air thickened. A few passengers flinched. The flight attendant took an instinctive half-step forward. But Elijah's hand didn't come out with anything threatening. Instead, it emerged holding a black leather wallet. With one quiet motion, he flipped it open. The gold badge gleamed in the overhead light. "Special Agent Elijah Brooks," he said, his voice low but unmistakably firm. "Federal Bureau of Investigation." Silence. It wasn't just that the cabin fell quiet, it was that the entire rhythm of the plane seemed to shift. The woman stared at the badge, her mouth slightly open, the color draining from her face. "I'm heading to Chicago to assist on a case," Elijah continued, now standing. "I protect this country. Even people like you." He didn't shout. He didn't gloat. His words weren't coded in anger, but in truth, delivered with the weight of someone who didn't need to prove anything to anyone. The woman sat down without a word. The flight crew stood still, unsure what to say. One of them nodded, slowly, as if confirming the reality of what they were seeing. The man they'd questioned was the only one on board with a federal clearance. Elijah tucked the badge away, calmly, quietly, and returned to his seat. He didn't need applause. He didn't need validation. He just needed people to understand what had happened, and why it never should have. The woman didn't speak. She couldn't. Her mouth opened as if to say something, but no words came. Her body, moments ago animated with misplaced confidence, now sat frozen in the seat she demanded to stay in. Across the aisle, a man in a business suit cleared his throat. "Sir," he said, leaning forward to catch Elijah's attention. I'm sorry you had to deal with that." Another voice chimed in from a row behind. "You handled that with serious grace, man. Respect." The flight attendant, her earlier unease now transformed into quiet shame, stepped closer. "Agent Brooks," she began, the title landing with weight now, "on behalf of the crew, I want to sincerely apologize. That should have never happened." Elijah gave a small nod, nothing more. He wasn't in it for apologies. He'd seen worse, endured more. But something about the silence in the cabin now felt different. It wasn't just awkward, it was reflective. The woman still hadn't moved. She sat hunched now, shrinking into herself, staring straight ahead as if she could somehow disappear into the seat back. She didn't look at Elijah again. Didn't say another word. Minutes later, a senior crew member arrived, whispered quietly to the attendants, then approached the woman. "Ma'am," he said gently but firmly, "we're going to have to ask you to step off the aircraft. The disturbance you created has compromised the comfort and safety of this flight." Her eyes widened. "What?" "I was just—" She stopped herself, glancing around at the faces staring back at her. None sympathetic. Not anymore. She gathered her bag, hands trembling slightly, and stood up. For the first time since she boarded, she walked without entitlement. No parting glance. No protest. The aisle was dead silent as she walked past. Once she was gone, the atmosphere shifted again, this time with relief. And something like pride. Not in what had happened, but in how Elijah had handled it. He sat back in his seat, staring out the window now, as the final preparations for takeoff resumed. The engines hummed softly beneath him, the world outside painted in early morning light. No one cheered. No one clapped. But when the plane lifted into the sky, there was a different kind of peace in the air, earned not through confrontation, but quiet, unshakable truth. As the plane leveled out in the sky, the cabin slowly settled. The usual hum of engine noise returned, along with a gentle chime of the seatbelt sign turning off. But the energy in the air hadn't fully gone back to normal. It was quieter than usual, more thoughtful. Elijah sat in his seat, eyes still on the window. From the outside, he looked composed, just like before. But inside, the weight of what had just happened pressed heavy against his chest, not because it surprised him, but because it didn't. He took a slow breath, not to calm himself, but to remind himself he was still in control. Still himself. A soft voice broke the silence. "Agent Brooks." He turned. It was the flight attendant from earlier, the one who had first approached him. She wasn't smiling this time, not the way flight attendants usually do. Her face carried something real, something human. "I just wanted to say, thank you. For your service," she said. Then after a pause, "and for how you handled that. I'm really sorry." Elijah nodded. "Thank you," he said simply. A few rows behind, two passengers spoke in hushed tones. One of them shook their head. "It's insane, man. All that over a seat." "No," the other replied. "It was never about the seat." Near the window across the aisle, a boy, maybe 8 or 9 years old, leaned toward Elijah with wide, curious eyes. "Are you really FBI?" Elijah finally smiled, the first real smile since he'd boarded. "Yeah, I am." The boy's eyes lit up. "Do you chase bad guys?" "Sometimes," Elijah chuckled. "But mostly, I try to stop bad things before they happen. That's the goal." The boy nodded, clearly impressed. His mother gave Elijah a grateful smile before gently pulling her son back to his seat. Elijah looked forward again, the clouds floating past the window. The storm had passed, for now. But moments like this stayed with him. Not because they broke him, but because they reminded him why he kept doing what he did. The flight continued, quiet and smooth, but what lingered wasn't turbulence. It was the memory of what had happened before takeoff. Elijah never raised his voice. He didn't argue, threaten, or posture. He didn't need to. His calm presence, his steady patience, and that one simple truth, a badge, a name, a lifetime of service, had said everything. He showed that dignity doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it just waits for the right moment to be seen. The woman had tried to define him with fear. But in the end, it was her own ignorance that unraveled, not his character. Elijah reminded everyone on that plane that strength isn't always loud. It isn't about domination, it's about knowing who you are and never letting anyone take that from you. And as the clouds drifted by, and the city slowly came into view below, passengers began to realize something simple, something powerful. You never know who you're sitting next to. You never know what they've done, or what they've given up, or what they still carry. Elijah Brooks carried it all, with quiet pride. And without saying much, he reminded everyone what real power looks like.